we can go to our first panel. Alice, the floor is yours. And if I can have the panelists join us. Thank you. Well, this particular topic, I think, is taking place spot on time. We have the IMO session opening today in London, so maybe you can give them some guidance.
My name is Alice Colarossi. I'm a partner at Richardson in the New York shipping team, and I have the pleasure to moderate this discussion today on the topic of net zero. Is it still happening? It's a very timely topic. As you know, the IMO MEPC is meeting this week and today in London to vote on a new IMO net zero framework that could make it an obligation to start using lower carbon fuels on ocean-going vessels under international law. So I have with me today 5 industry leaders who each have unique perspectives to share on this topic. And before we get started, I would like to ask each panelist to very briefly introduce themselves.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Morten Lerø. I'm heading the Maritime Advisory Team in DNV. So in the maritime industry, DNV is both leading class society and a maritime advisor. So I'm heading up the team on the advisory side, running a global team present in the bigger maritime locations around the world. 25 years in the maritime industry, and currently I'm based in Oslo.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Semiramis Paliou, the CEO of Diana Shipping. It's a dry bulk shipping company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We transport commodities all over the world. Dry cargo, mainly coal, grain, iron ore. We're based in Athens, Greece, and it's always lovely to be here joining the Capital Link.
Good morning, my name is John Lycouris. I'm with Dorian LPG Limited. I'm the head of sustainability efforts in Dorian and the director of the company, have been since the beginning. We operate at a fleet of about 30 ships, all LPG, large LPG carriers, and our head office is in Stamford, Connecticut. We have offices in Athens and Denmark. Thanks.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jeff Chan. I head our sustainability efforts and investor relations at Purus. We're a ship owner-operator, fleet of over 70 vessels today. We are headquartered in Singapore, but our operations are really global, and we really focus on 2 main sectors. One is gas, but it is diversified gas. We transport LNG, ammonia, LPG, ethane on long-term time charters, and then the other part of our business is offshore energy. That's primarily offshore wind today, so we provide the offshore wind support vessels that help support the commissioning and O&M of offshore wind farms and other offshore projects. Global business, offshore is primarily UK, North Sea, but expanding elsewhere, and gas is primarily out of Singapore and also global.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Ben Richardson. I'm the CEO of a company called Sulnox. Firstly, a big thank you to Capital Link for inviting us here. Great to see so many people. Thank you, Nicholas and Kayla and the rest of the team. So Sulnox is a UK-listed company. Our shares are traded in the UK, and it's also traded in the OTC. And what we are is we're inventors of energy transition solutions. So we've invented patented green technology which take today's fuels and improve combustion. So all of your MGOs, your HSFOs, your VLSFOs, they burn incompletely. But by improving combustion, we can actually reduce the fossil fuel consumption some 4 to 6%, also dramatically reducing greenhouse gases, and that black smoke, which is just unburnt fuel, has also disappeared completely. So we are trying to make a difference today. While we know the fuels of the future, or what we're going to talk about, we are the solution for now, and very much part of the armory to help the world today. Thank you.
Thank you all. So let's talk about the concept of net zero and how many shipping companies are already working toward that ambitious goal. So we have 3 on the panel, right? We have Diana Shipping, Dorian LPG, and Purus Marine, and all 3 are members of the Getting to Zero Coalition. So my first question is, what does net zero mean in the context of your company's strategy on operations? And are there timelines and milestones that you are working towards in terms of fleet readiness? Who would like to get started here?
I can start.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Net zero is, for most of us, it should be, a progressive improvement, a progressive reduction of greenhouse gases, and the use of possible fuels that improve the profile of our fleet and of our ships. So the way we are thinking about it is improving measurably the fleet every year, trying to be better than the trajectory set out by the IMO. And we have short-term goals, medium-term, and long-term goals. The short-term goals are from 25 to 28, where we're going to optimize whatever we have available to us, operationally, technically, improve our performance of our ships. From 28 to 35, we're going to start using alternative methods of improving our emissions, which could mean also alternative fuels, carbon capture, and other ways of achieving that. And then from 2035 onwards, we're going to look into ships that are going to be more cleaner, better for the environment. So generally, our whole approach to net zero is making the fleet improve and be better than the IMO trajectory. Right now, we're about 10% better than the IMO trajectory as of now, and about 18% of our fleet is dual fuel already, and we are looking into having the fleet 100% dual fuel in the near future, whenever is that possible. That's it.
Great. Jeffrey or Semiramis,
Yes.
would you like to share about your own perspective on what the road to net zero looks like in your company?
Net zero is very important for us. We need to comply with the IMO regulations as they stand today, which is trying to reach net zero emissions by around 2050. That is a journey that has to do with technology, a journey that has to do with mindset. We are starting also slowly with small steps, improving our existing fleet by using fuel-efficient devices, and maybe we'll talk about other things later on. We've also placed an order for 2 dual-fuel methanol dry bulk Kamsarmax vessels, which will be delivered to us at the end of 2027, 2028. That's a big commitment. From our part, to try and drive the industry and our company towards net zero. In general, I think it's very important to be compliant, relevant, and current as a company. And it's important to make sure we take and make these steps necessary today so that we are at the forefront in a couple of years.
I think at Purus, we are in a bit of a different position as it relates to net zero, in the sense that as a relatively younger company, but still with a sizable fleet today, when we started the company, we really had focusing on enabling the broader energy transition as our mission. So that's really driven us to the sectors that we focus on today. So what net zero means to us is obviously staying ahead of where the IMO would like to get to, obviously staying ahead of the Paris Agreement targets, but how we've done that is really taking a phased approach and really looking at it vessel by vessel. So our offshore energy fleets is primarily using hybrid electrification today. There's obviously pathways to improve the time using running on battery, improving obviously battery efficiency, battery capacity, offshore charging, et cetera. So for those vessels, we can see, and also using alternative fuels in the mix as well. So for those vessels, we can see a pathway to getting to net zero closer to 2030. On the gas side, obviously different. Again, we've had the advantage of ordering vessels and delivering vessels that are dual fuel ready or dual fuel capable today. Similar to my colleagues John and Semiramis, looking at additional, whether it's operational efficiencies, energy saving devices, and future technology down the road. But I think it's important to remember and be pragmatic as ship owners. We can only focus on tail to wake, right? Obviously the net zero framework, which is focused on well to wake, we can't really control that. So we're really focused on what we can do under our vessels, and we're hoping that the broader industry and the broader energy industry can come around in terms of providing that infrastructure that we're ultimately going to need.
Right, and what you just bring us is actually our next topic, which is to look at the challenges. And so clearly you all have strong motivations to work toward net zero and decarbonization. But how do you balance that goal with market constraints, such as freight rates and fuel costs, and as you just mentioned, fuel availability? How do you navigate that situation? And that's a question for probably our three shipping companies as well, but I don't know who would like to take the floor on this one.
Yeah, maybe I'll just take that first. Being on long-term time charters for our vessels, it's obviously fuel costs are the consideration of the charters, but what we want to do is provide the most fuel-efficient and thus carbon-efficient vessels available to our charters, to ensure that they remain as attractive as possible. But we're also focusing on what's commercially viable today in terms of technologies, and having maximum flexibility in terms of our vessels to retrofit in the future to the emerging technologies of tomorrow.
Right. And are customers willing to pay a green premium? How is things playing out for you, Semiramis? And
at the moment, we don't see any customer willing to pay a green premium, which makes our life very difficult. But regarding balance, decarbonization is a very difficult balance. You need to balance between the risks, technology, making economic sense, and obviously having the support of your customer in order to make the next step.
Right. Would you like to add anything before we get to our next topic, John?
Yes, I wanted to add something.
Yes.
We do take it seriously. We do look into that, and we look a little bit forward than what is required by the regulations. We have invested in a company that does carbon capture, and we have invested in a company that does waste gas into green methanol. So these are areas where we think that there is progress in technology, and we are closely monitoring all the other technologies that are going on, including shore power and battery assisted ships. So these are the items that we are looking at for the future.
Yeah. Perhaps, Ben, you would like to add something on this topic, since that's something that you are also working on?
Well, frankly, we are the people that are trying to provide the solution today for the fuels that are available today, while we wait for other fuels to come online and for the whole new infrastructure to be built. Semiramis has got it right. Frankly, the reality is that fossil fuels are here to stay. No one is willing to pay for the cost. And only now we see those vessels in Europe having to use biofuels. The regulation is meaning that despite the biofuels being so much more expensive, it's actually a net win for those vessels staying in Europe. So I think we're going to talk later about a regulatory stick versus the carrot. And I think ship owners need a regulatory stick to get going, but ultimately the carrot is what drives the industry.
Right, so let's talk about regulatory matters, right? Of course, the industry is at a regulatory crossroads today, as the IMO is voting on the adoption of a new net zero framework. So let's get the big question out of the way. How likely is it that the MEPC will adopt the new regulations? Perhaps Morten, you'd like to speak to this, since I believe DNV is following that closely. I guess like everyone else, but yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think everybody is following that question
Of
quite
course.
closely. So, of course, net zero has been a big discussion topic for many years already, and the ambitions are clear. Of course, this Friday it will be a big decision in the IMO. Will it go through or not? It will be very exciting to see if the sentiment in that room has changed since MEPC in April. In April, it seemed that, or it was clearly quite a majority of the countries were in favor of putting this in place as one global regulation to steer an industry that is really used to global regulations. And I think many players are also then fearing the alternative, which probably will be more complex and more local, either regional or national regulations that ship owners need to then relate to. So yeah, very interesting to see on Friday, but we think that there are quite, despite all the fuss in the media and all the resistance, that there are quite a lot of countries that will be in favor.
Right. So I don't want to get political today, but I think we ought to mention the US opposition and the US criticism of the IMO framework as a global carbon tax. Over the weekend, the US also threatened to sanction countries that support the net zero framework. And one of the concerns raised by the United States is the treatment of LNG under the new framework. LNG, of course, is currently one of the cheapest and most widely available transition fuels, but it may be penalized under the IMO long-term targets under the net zero framework. So would anyone like to speak to this issue, perhaps more specifically on LNG under the new framework? I think, Jeffrey, you mentioned that you are involved in the transport of LNG, so that must be a sector that you're following closely. Do you have any concerns or any thoughts on this?
Sure. I call DNV to ask those questions as well. No.
Okay. Wow.
So I think we need to be a little bit pragmatic about what fuels are available and what they're going to cost and what our customers are willing to pay. And the reality is that LNG is one of the only alternative quote-unquote fuels out there that is available at scale at a reasonable cost, certainly relative to future fuels, and has the infrastructure available. I think under the current framework, if you're using LNG, that should allow you to operate pretty well into the mid-2030s, and beyond that, you'll have to look at additional, again, emerging technologies, carbon capture, et cetera, maybe bio, maybe e-LNG, although I don't think we ultimately get there. I think the other piece of it is that the main concern on a well-to-wake basis is the methane slip. So if anything, this potentially helps drive capital towards abatement technologies that help reduce that slip as well. So it's something we're obviously watching very closely, but the reality is there's not a lot of alternatives out there today, and I think we'll see that view evolve if this passes and we get into the nitty-gritty of what that looks like.
Right.
I just want to add to Jeffrey, because I think he touched on a few good points. LNG has not really been totally, the methodology of analyzing the life cycle analysis of LNG is not finished yet. It's going to be finished sometime in 27, so there's a lot more open-ended questions, the methane slip being one of the main reasons why, and because certain engines produce more methane slip than others. There's a lot of discussion about these items, but LNG is a viable fuel, and it is probably a very good fuel for transitioning. And I'm sure it will be properly analyzed. The life cycle analysis of LNG will be analyzed better and set around 2027. So we have a little bit of time for that. By the way, LPG is a little bit better than LNG because it does not have the methane slip. So we prefer LPG, and of course we carry LPG as well. So I have to plug that in because it is one of the best fuels for transitioning.
Right, of course, and I was just going to ask because, yes, there are similarities, although, as you say, you say LPG is better, so I'm taking your word here, but do similar concerns apply to here in terms of treatment under the new framework in respect of LPG?
Treatment?
Like, that they could also...
It is already, the life cycle analysis of LPG is better than LNG right now. Well to wake, it is better. You know, the BTU content is good. And we don't have the problem of methane slip. These are all positives for LPG. Hence, if you look at the charts, LPG comes out one of the best fuels for the future. Sorry.
All right.
That's true.
No, sure. So let's go a bit more into detail on the new IMO framework. So it involves a two-tiered system with base compliance goals and more ambitious direct compliance goals. And there are penalties, which become more expensive if you do not meet the direct compliance goals. There are also rewards for companies that go beyond the direct compliance goals in terms of carbon emissions. And as was mentioned, right, it's still on a well-to-wake basis. Now, I wonder whether shipping companies are already strategizing and making investment decisions influenced by that framework, and which parts of the framework are like the most likely to really have an impact and to influence your decisions. Who would like to talk on this point?
Let me take it very quickly.
Yeah, please go ahead.
As we said, the IMO regulation framework is still a bit vague, so no clear decisions can be made. However, I think it is much better to incentivize early movers than to penalize laggers. But probably you need both to try and push the industry forward. The IMO regulations is working as a catalyst to try and help the industry decarbonize. So directly it tries to reduce the price gap between alternative fuels and carbon fuels, and also incentivizes ship owners to invest in devices and technology that will reduce their emissions, thereby reducing the penalties they need to pay. Indirectly, the IMO framework helps decarbonization because the money collected supposedly returns back into the shipping industry, so it's cyclical. Investing in research and development into upscaling and scaling up new fuels, infrastructure, making sure the fuels are safe. So basically it's a cyclical mechanism that supports decarbonization. If this doesn't go through and becomes more of a regional mechanism where each country charges a fee for decarbonizing efforts, then that will be a disaster for our shipping industry, which is a global industry. It will be very difficult to comply, but I think the worst thing is that the money collected through these regional and national organizations will definitely not go back into shipping as such.
Right, and so you mentioned the concern, right, to have, I guess, duplicative or several layers of regulations on this topic at the national, regional, and IMO level. And I think it's worth mentioning here the recent EU ETS regulations on Fuel EU as a recent example of regulations on carbon pricing, on emissions limits that the shipping industry is having to adjust to. Are there lessons to be learned from that experience, and is there a significant concern of like a double burden, or how are you navigating those, having those different requirements in place?
I'll take that. Hopefully there are lessons to be learned, and just as we looked at the EU ETS and implementing that, it was much more complex than we thought, and there was not a lot of clarity. Is it the DOC holder? Is it the ship owner?
Right.
Is it the charterer? Setting up the accounts and how that was determined, quite frankly, was a disaster. So hopefully the IMO learns from that and takes that into account. I think the point on harmonizing the rules is a really important one in order for this to be effective at all. I believe the EU ETS and the FuelEU EU does have provisions to take into account any further steps from the IMO. So to the extent that the IMO moves forward, hopefully that gets addressed. I think there is a big focus on harmonizing beyond that. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of lessons to be learned in terms of just simplifying the process of compliance and clarifying, because there's so many parties involved, who's responsible for what and how that works.
And just to add to this is what the IMO is going to do with all these monies that are going to be collected on carbon taxes. We're talking $30 billion a year, maybe rising to $50 billion. It's a huge amount of money. How it's going to be accounted for, who is going to get it, which countries are going to get it, which industry is going to get it, how it's going to turn back. That's where the ship owners are really concerned about. And I think it's a big concern for all of us in the shipping industry about this, how it's going to be distributed. So it's a big discussion topic.
Yeah, I hear you. Morten, I think DNV helps ship owners navigate some of these questions. Do you have anything to add here?
No, maybe just to add to the question on double burden on EU or the IMO framework. So if you look at the EU ETS, that's part of, let's say, more general taxation schemes that goes beyond the maritime industry.
Right.
So it's quite likely that that will continue regardless of the decisions on the IMO framework. But as was pointed out, when it comes to the Fuel EU Maritime, then EU has said that they will revise their rules or their regulations further down the road, and they will for sure take into account any progress or any decisions made by the IMO. And if it means that the two regulation sets will be harmonized, if it means that Fuel EU Maritime will be phased out, or if it stays as it is, that remains to be seen. But it's definitely something that will be up for revision, and I would assume that the EU also would then look at how, well, in case the IMO framework is being adopted now, how well that is really playing out in practice before they do the changes on their own regulations.
So we've talked about some of the points on which there's some concerns, some uncertainty, and one of the points that has been mentioned, right, is the question of how each fuel will be rated in terms of life cycle greenhouse gas intensity, and which methodology will be used to make that determination. There's also a concept of zero or near zero fuel, which is not very clear yet in the new IMO framework. So looking at the different types of low carbon fuels that are currently available or being developed, which ones do you see as the most promising, also in light of this new framework? And is it realistic to aim at using what the IMO calls zero fuels, or zero carbon emission fuels?
I can start, but I'm not a ship owner, so...
No, of course.
Look, every one of the alternative fuels has a problem, right? None of the infrastructure's there, whilst the only real solution is nuclear, right? And this is the elephant in the room, but that's not going to happen due to the geopolitical risks. So methanol can't be made in enough scale. Ammonia, dangerous, and also very carbon intensive unless it's green methanol, which is unusual. And then hydrogen, needs a whole new infrastructure and very difficult to transport, etc. So the reality is we're going to be burning fossil fuels for a long time. Vitol have come out and said peak fuel is not until 2040. I know that's not just for shipping, but it's still a long way away, and we're going to, despite what we're doing in alternative fuels, we're still burning far more as a planet than we are. So the answer is, what can we do today with today's fuels to try and reduce the burden of tomorrow on the planet, and whilst we wait for the industry to catch up. And it is a very good point. What is the IMO going to do to create that infrastructure that's needed ahead of ship owners being able to adopt it as a viable alternative?
Yes, I mean, one way to look at what could be the most attractive transition fuel is to look at what does the fleet look like today, and also add on what is in the order book up to 2030. And if you look at the different alternative fuels that is in that mix, then you see there's quite a lot of LNG. You see that there is quite some, there's also some methanol and some LPG, and there is a small portion of hydrogen and ammonia. And that in total accounts for about 18% of the total fleet. If you then compare to the production volumes that we can possibly see in the next few years up to 2030, then and look at the low greenhouse gas fuels. For the first few years, there's quite a bit of biofuels available, both biodiesel and biomethane, which then means that these are the ones that are the most available to shipping in the first few years. And also the infrastructure is quite well in place for those fuels. If you look a little bit further down the road and some more years into the future, then of course there are quite a few projects on both ammonia and on hydrogen, and particularly if you go a little bit after the 2030s. But still, there are quite a few of these projects that really hasn't got the final investment decision. So I think also on the fuel production side, they are waiting for some clear signals to really get going on the production and get that ramped up. And of course, some clarity on the regulations for shipping would also be beneficial for that side.
Right. And here, I guess I wonder, if the IMO framework is adopted, do you expect it to become even more challenging to find some of these low-carbon fuels like methanol because of higher demand? On the other hand, do you think that this new regulation will lead to more investments by shipping companies in the production of these fuels, and that therefore this will end up helping? Like, how do you expect this to play out? Yeah, I see you nodding, Semiramis. Do you have any thoughts?
I'm pretty sure that once we have a clear goal and a clear visibility of the path ahead, then investments will start coming in quite fast. I think we felt that a couple of months ago, maybe a year and so ago, when the momentum about green energy was actually more active between charterers and ship owners. There were a couple of vessels with new technology being ordered. So once the momentum is there, I think there's going to be more activity. Obviously, as a ship owner, you need to remain very agile, build ships with flexibility for the future, implement technology that exists today. But once we have a clear path, I'm very confident we'll see a lot of traction towards alternative fuels and new technologies.
Right, and you mentioned earlier, I think, your investment in 2 dual fuel methanol vessels, right?
Correct.
Can you talk a bit about that investment decisions, and did the new regulation have any impact here, or how did you think about those issues?
It goes back to the period when I felt that there was momentum between charterers and shipyards interested to produce new designs. We felt that it's an investment that pushes the industry in the right direction. It's not a commitment towards methanol as such, but it's something that is working in favor of our company. We're building the mindset of our employees to move towards a greener and more sustainable industry. I think that's mainly the reasoning behind that investment.
Sure. Does anyone have anything to add on this topic? Otherwise, I just want to make sure we keep some time to, since we talked a lot about fuels, but I want to make sure we keep some time to talk about other decarbonization initiatives and new technologies that can help get closer to net zero. So perhaps, Ben, you'd like to speak to this topic, since that's, you talked a bit already about what your company is doing, but yeah, do you have any perspectives to share on this topic?
So, look, we all know that it's incremental change that's going to make a difference. I stood on another panel with Eastern Pacific Shipping in Singapore, and they've spent 2.6 billion trying to decarbonize their fleet to date. So the top of the list is doing what you do today and doing it better. So more telemetry, and the reality is when you measure, you will perform, and that's tightening up. I mean, 4 years ago, when I joined Sulnox, people were measuring their fuel with literally a rope and a weight on the end of it, right? So there's no way they knew how much fuel they're consuming on a day-to-day basis. Now we have mass flow meters, and I'm hopeful that the MEPC will also bring in continuous emission monitoring systems, so we can actually see what emissions are being given from any particular vessel, and rewarding those that have the most efficient vessels. Look, at the end of the day, every vessel owner wants to have the most efficient ship, because then they get better charter rates. So we are all going in the right direction, but it's the practicality that I mentioned earlier that's holding everything back, and it needs to be incentivized to help ship owners to onboard these new technologies quicker.
Right. Jeffrey, John, are there new technologies that you find promising, or what are your thoughts on this?
No, I was just going to add about the fuels that we will need, to have a better certification of the alternative fuels, so we know what we are using. Of course, fuel availability we talked about, and the compliance measures, whether you're going to be better off polluting and pay for polluting, or paying, getting a reward for doing what you're doing, and that is going to be balanced by the markets and by the cost of fuels and their availability, because it might be easier for somebody to pollute and pay for their pollution rather than buy the alternative fuel, which is going to be too expensive. So that's going to be the market mechanism that's going to help the markets decide which way to go. And if we don't move forward with better fuels and having a good reward mechanism and a good quality of alternative fuels, we're not going to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I could add very quickly that we need to decarbonize or help decarbonize the existing fleet as well, which is a huge part of our fleet today. So we're going to be seeing more of carbon capture devices on board. We're seeing new paints being implemented, which reduce the resistance and hence the consumption of the engine. And also, we need to talk about artificial intelligence, which will help us measure and have real-time data, as Ben mentioned, in order, whatever you can measure, you can improve. So it's a mechanism, a tool which will definitely help the industry decarbonize.
Right. And so decarbonization is not just a technical challenge, there's also a leadership challenge here. And which mindset shifts do you think are necessary within the maritime industry to achieve net zero? And that will be my final question. We just have a couple of minutes left. If you want to share any final thoughts, maybe more high level before we conclude, please take the floor. Yes, go ahead, Ben.
No, I was going to try and defer to the ship owners.
Oh, sorry. I misunderstood.
Look, the problem that the IMO has is obviously it's trying to herd cats, and it's trying to do the right thing, but there are so many countries and agendas and whatever in play, and it's very tough. But I think, as I mentioned previously, that we've got to put the right infrastructure in place so that ship owners and investors can feel comfortable that this is something they can move into. And until that's in place, everyone's going to struggle to push forward in a marked way.
I see a raised hand, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a definite shift in the mindset. You need to be very agile to keep up with developments. You need to be courageous, because you may need to make some decisions that are not always logical, but they are there to push the industry forward. And definitely you have to have a collaborative mindset, because decarbonizing is a risky process. You need to team up in partnership with your stakeholders to share the risks, but to benefit the positive things it will also bring. I think that's on mindset.
I think just to add to that, I mean, shipping is a notoriously conservative industry, And what we're really asking is to adopt a Formula One type fail fast. But the problem is, if you get it wrong, you have significant consequence. So it's finding those incremental changes that can make a big difference today, while we hope that the wider leadership puts in the pieces for tomorrow.
No, I think also we're discussing specific fuels, we're discussing specific technologies, but in order to solve the challenges ahead of us, we probably need to look at many different types of fuels and many different types of technologies to actually move the industry in the right direction when it comes to meeting the targets that have been set. Also on the collaboration, I fully agree that this is not only a shipping problem, it's about collaborating with the other industries. Infrastructure is an extremely important topic, both when it comes to fuel supply, but also, for instance, on carbon capture and storage aspect. So collaboration will definitely be needed outside and with other industries as well.
All right, well, on this note, I think we're running out of time, so thank you very much to each of the panelists, and thank you to Capital Link, Nicholas, for having us today. I think this was a great discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I understand, listening to all of you, that fossil fuels are going to be here for some time. Yes, we have LNG. All the alternative fuels that will take time to develop. At the same time, we just came back from Maritime Cyprus. We heard a number of ship owners there being very passionate about slow steaming and the effect on the reduction of emissions. Ben, if we add your product to the mix, that will further reduce emissions. If we implement everything that Semiramis was talking about, we'll have even more reduction of emissions. So if you combine all that stuff together, don't we have a significant emissions reduction possibility on the existing fleet right now?
Yes. So in short, if you add up all the performance-saving devices, the rotors, the propellers, and the fuel additives like Sulnox, then we can make a big difference today. But what it can't do is go to zero on our own. But you know, if companies used Sulnox across the globe today, we could remove the footprint of CO2 for the equivalent of India or the whole of Europe's transportation emissions. So, yeah, there are alternatives available today, and we need to adopt those because the real solutions, the hydrogens, the ammonias, they're still a long way away from being at scale. So, whatever we can do now.
I want to add to Ben what he's saying. I think we need a global framework for the future. If we do not have a global framework and we allow 10 or 15, regional or national kind of regulations to be implemented, we will not be able to operate. We need the global framework within which shipping can, survive and go forward, because shipping is cost sensitive. It really can only live if it knows the regulations and can move forward within those regulations, not with 10 or 15 different countries kind of implementing their own regulations. It's going to be a very difficult situation for everybody.